What's up YouTube? It's your girl Mamba here, and today's video is going to be my second movie review here on my channel, and the movie we're going to be discussing is Century Fox's final X-Men film, Dark Phoenix. If you guys don't already know by the title of this video, there will be spoilers in this video, so make sure that if you have not seen it, this is your time to exit right now. So if you guys don't already know, Disney has purchased Century Fox and therefore pulled the plug on the X-Men films. Not that I'm upset about that, because honestly it's been a little up and down with their X-Men adaptations. So from what I hear, MCU is going to be taking over and creating their own movies, and that's going to be really amazing. Outside of Logan and possibly X-Men First Class and Days of Future Past, I think that they were really crazy. Those three films were my favorite out of the X-Men adaptations from Century Fox. But this one, I don't know how I feel about this one. So let's get into it. So like my previous videos, I want to keep my movie reviews quick and to the point, because if not, I can talk all day. And especially on this film, I can talk straight up for about half an hour on this film alone. So I'm just going to highlight the pros and the cons for this film and my overall opinion of it at the end of this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. So let's start off with the first pro. So as avid X-Men followers, I'm sure that you guys have seen the other films. You would already know that this is not the first time we see Jean Grey evoke the Phoenix. And out of all of the attempts that they've done this before in other films, this would be my favorite way. Mostly because this is the closest it is to the actual comic and the actual animation that I grew up watching. So I will tell you guys as a disclaimer right now, I am not a big comic book reader. Never was when I was a child. I've read comic books, but not that many, not nearly as many. So for me, I'm pulling a lot of this from the actual episode of the animated series back in the 90s. I used to watch that heavily, and I actually remember this particular episode because it was such an iconic episode. So for me, this was the best Phoenix adaptation, considering that the other ones, she just randomly had it. And we can discuss that in the cons because we've had some issues with that. Second thing that I loved about this film has to be the actual space mission. So the idea of the X-Men getting into the Blackbird, going up on a rescue mission to save the astronauts that get stranded out right outside the atmosphere of Earth because of the Phoenix Force, was definitely my favorite part of the whole film, because that's actually where we get to see the X-Men working together and seeing how their abilities really complement each other. So the scene with Nightcrawler and Quicksilver and then Jean at the end of it, just the way they did everything looked amazing. So I absolutely love the space mission rescue. That was my favorite part and one of the most, to me, gonna be the most memorable scenes of all the X-Men. Third thing that I loved about this film has to be that Nightcrawler got a lot more screen time. When I think of Nightcrawler, I think of the most iconic scenes from him, and that would possibly be the White House. But for me, this one, he got a lot more screen time as far as I am concerned. And my favorite thing is that in the train scene, how he kind of got pissed and went all out in that scene and started killing everybody. You got to kind of see how damaging and how dangerous Nightcrawler can be, and I loved seeing that. That was awesome. The fourth thing that I really took away from this film was Magneto and Xavier. So in particular, Magneto, obviously now on his own island, trying to just stay away from humanity. He's just not happy with us, obviously, and after everything that's happened. So he's trying to live his own life. Seeing him get emotional over Raven's death was really big moment for me. It was just a really good scene for me where you really got to see Magneto and how he felt about Mystique. The other thing that I really enjoyed about it was the fact that that kind of showdown that he had with Jean when she showed up to his island with the helicopter. That was awesome sauce. I really liked that scene. It had me at the edge of my seat. As far as Xavier, it was really interesting to see Xavier kind of a little bit on a villainous role, even though it was unintentional. So seeing how the choices that he makes is not always right, and how he doesn't always know the right thing, and kind of how he gets a bit prideful and starts enjoying the attention that he gets. So that created that little like stress between him and Raven, and even when he was talking to Beast in the kitchen, how prideful Xavier can be. So it was really interesting to see a little bit of a darker side of Xavier. Now, the fifth thing I'm going to talk about is something that if you've seen other movie reviews, they kind of complain about, which is the train scene. A lot of people tend to have a really big issue about them having this fight scene in the train because they felt like it was too condensed. You couldn't really get the big cinematic action, but I actually think the opposite. I actually love the train scene. I thought the train scene was awesome. Having a fight scene more condensed like that, kind of going from, train cart to train cart, and it was seeing how each mutant had their power and how they would semi-work together, how they would work alone. The Magneto scene with the guns was phenomenal. I really like that compact fighting scene. I think it made things more difficult. I actually really enjoyed the train scene. And the last thing I'm going to take away from the film that I really loved was at the end when Charles is in Europe, retired, and Charles shows up and they play their chess game. That's just nostalgic and amazing. Obviously we see Phoenix in the sky because we all know, Jean, but she's not dead. But I really, really enjoyed that scene with the chess match because that's just iconic. It was awesome. Now let's just go ahead and get into the cons. So just like I said, the first thing, this was my favorite adaptation of Phoenix and how Jean ends up becoming Dark Phoenix. That's also kind of a con because technically, we all know this, Jean did have the Phoenix Force where she beat Apocalypse in X-Men Apocalypse. So the timeline is all messed up. It's just not working. And I don't understand the thought process that happens. Like, I'm not as picky as a lot of people who are avid fans of this series and avid comic book readers. I'm not as picky when they take a comic and they translate it into a film because things have to change. But the timeline is terrible. Just pick a freaking story and stick to it. It drives me crazy. Second thing that I did not enjoy is Raven's death. That was completely from left field. Even though we all knew this, it was spoiled in the trailers. I don't understand why they decided for Raven to die. I get that for dramatic purposes, in order to really sell how villainous Jean was and how dangerous she was when she was Dark Phoenix. But I just don't think that was necessary. That doesn't follow any story. It's just, I don't like it at all. I understand that they also wanted it as a way to trigger Magneto to join Beast, but the truth of the matter, if you really think about it, Magneto is all about mutants. He doesn't care about the human race, and Jean was a threat to mutants all alike. So I think they could have done it another way. They could have easily had, freaking recruited Magneto just by showing that she was a threat to mutants as well. That's it. The other thing that people were complaining about was that Raven's death happens at Jean's childhood, home, which was very similar to X-Men The Last Stand, where she actually kills Xavier instead in her childhood home. So it was a little weird. And yeah, I was reading an article about why the director did that. He said it wasn't for, paying homage or anything like that. It was supposed to stand on its own. But dude, that's like super, super similar. Like, why? Third thing that I didn't like about this film is that Quicksilver's time on the screen was very minimal. I know that they had to cut out certain characters. I mean, they didn't even play into a lot of other characters that were in Xavier's gifted school. There was very little that we saw from other mutants outside of Dazzler, but we had, Quicksilver barely was in the film. He was mostly in the beginning with the space mission, and pretty much that was it. And still, they do not hint anything about him being Magneto's son. So it was just, I don't know. I think Quicksilver is definitely a fan favorite, and they cut a lot of his time. I mean, I just don't understand that. The fourth thing I didn't like about the film was how quickly Jean was able to take control of the Phoenix the moment she has a quick conversation with Xavier. She's already with the alien Smith, and Xavier talks to her for 5 minutes, and she recalls all these memories in his head, and then next thing you know, she's like, oh yeah, Phoenix, I got this, don't worry about it. That was way too quick. I think at that point they switched gears way too fast, and I felt like there should have been a little bit more struggle on her gaining control of the Phoenix at that point. And the last thing I want to discuss that was a little weird to me was the alien humanoids that they had in there. They felt like just an extra thing that they threw in there, even though they were technically supposed to be a threat. Jean is primarily the villain in this story, but they just threw in the alien Smith. No explanation to what they were. Very little screen time up until the last quarter of the film. And it was just like, whatever. It was like I could have done without them at this point. So, you know, especially that they didn't explain what alien race this was, and outside of the very brief, small backstory that Smith told Jean, it was kind of like, whatever, you know? And then I was trying to beat my head, trying to figure out what alien race was this? You know, they gave no name, nothing. So I did a little research, and it turns out, and I don't know, like, how to pronounce it, probably if it's pronounced differently, but the alien race in the film was actually the Dabari. So apparently they are loosely connected. Well, they're directly connected with the Phoenix Force because their planet is destroyed by the Phoenix Force. And, you know, they're this alien race out in space that the Phoenix did technically, it didn't run through their planet like it did in the movie. Apparently it destroyed their sun and their solar system. So this actually does happen. However, there's a lot of things that they end up changing in the film as well after doing more research. So if you guys didn't know, the alien race in the film was Dabari. So yes, they were kind of blah to me. So that pretty much sums up my pros and cons for this film. As you guys can I don't know where I stand with this. There were elements that I enjoyed. There were a lot of elements that I didn't. And for this to be a final film, it kind of just left more holes than it did anything else. So for me, I think it's best that the MCU just freaking scratches everything off and just start from scratch. And one of the biggest problems that I think Century Fox did not do, well, what they had and they didn't really capitalize on, is that almost every movie, well, pretty much every movie that they made was the team and didn't do what Marvel has shown to prove to be amazing and works, which is having solo films. Outside of Wolverine, we have no solo films. We just have the teams, and we needed to kind of like build on these teams. And I don't know, I feel like they could have done, there's so many mutants, there's so many awesome storylines that they could have done that. They could have given us more. So as far as I'm concerned, The Dark Phoenix was an okay film, and it's not in my top rank, and it's a shame because it's such an iconic story, but it is what it is. So what did you guys think about Dark Phoenix? Did you guys absolutely hated it? I mean, Rotten Tomatoes gave them like a really low score. There were elements that I enjoyed and there were elements that I did not. I don't hate the film. I think it was better compared to some of the other ones that they've done, but the story and everything, it just wasn't working for me. So I'll give it like a C. I'll give it a C, yes. So what did you guys think? Comment it down below. Let's talk. Peace and chicken grease.